Good day, viewers. Welcome to a new edition of 30 Minutes, the interactive program of Trust Television with me, Manir Dan Ali. Our guest today is a former Nigerian ambassador to Sudan, that is Ambassador Dahiru Sulaiman. He's here to help us understand what is currently going on in Sudan, that is the upheaval, the artillery shells that are landing on the sides of the two warring factions, so to say, the head of the Sudanese military government and his deputy, who are at each other's throat. Ambassador Dahiru, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much.
You served in Sudan, and you were telling me just before we came on the program, even twice.
Yes.
And that was in 1998 and then in
99.
Yes, 1998 to 99. Were you the ambassador at that time?
I was not the ambassador. I was what we call charge d'affaires.
Charge, right. The second in command.
Charge d'affaires. Then later on, I went back as ambassador in 2005. So I'm very familiar.
That was when even the other crisis in Sudan was still running. That is the Darfur crisis, and then even they want to do with southern Sudan, which is currently an independent country.
If you look at the history of Sudan, you will find that it has been having one serious problem or the other since independence in 1956. Now, between 1956 and now, Sudan saw peace for only 11 years, 1972 to 1983.
That was under Jafar al-Numairi?
Pardon?
Was it under Jafar, the president, Jafar al-Numairi?
Yeah, the Jafar al-Numairi,
Sawa al-Dahab and the other
yes,
presidents that were there.
Omar al-Bashir. Now, my own reading of the situation is that the leadership has not been honest and sincere.
Yeah, the leadership of Sudan itself.
Yeah, has not been honest and sincere in the way and manner they run the government, or
are you
how they
talking,
treat their own people.
right, are you talking about the agitations, because the current government was brought about after repeated protests that brought down the government of former President Omar al-Bashir. And they haven't yet fulfilled the promise of full civil rule.
Yes. Omar al-Bashir toppled the government of Sadiq al-Mahdi.
That was an elected government.
And he was in power for virtually 30 years. He transmuted from military to civilian. But what I observed when I was there, anytime there was a serious issue, he dropped his jalabia and wore military uniform.
So at heart, he remained a military man, so to say.
So he was more of a military man than a civilian president.
Is it because the Arab countries of Maghreb, that is, if you will even include Sudan, Egypt, Algeria and others, they always have this strong presence of powerful military men?
It could be so, because you had Mubarak in Egypt, very powerful before he was removed. You had Gaddafi in Libya, very strong before he was removed. Then you had Ben Ali in Tunisia, who was also very strong. Algeria, and then you come down to Chad, which shares border with
Sudan and with Nigeria.
Very strong leader. Then Central African Republic, the same thing, Ethiopia, the same thing, Eritrea, the same thing. So it is a region of strong rulers, but without the common touch of what to do to get the mass of their people out of the extreme poverty they are in. Sometimes I wonder how people survive in Sudan, because the poverty level is very high. But then you see those in government lavishly enjoying life.
But wouldn't Nigerians say that is very familiar? It's similar to what is happening
here. It is also familiar in Nigeria, because the way we do things, nobody will see public officials in Nigeria and believe that there is poverty. But drive out of Abuja, go to Kwali, go to Abaji,
or just to Papi.
Not to talk of going far. That is where you know that there is poverty in the country. But unfortunately, leadership in Africa is completely detached from the realities of the people they purport to govern.
But the current situation in Sudan itself appears to be a battle of wits between these two top men who are both military, that is the general who is the head of the army, General Burhan, and then on the other you have Hamdok, who is the head of the Rapid Support Force, which actually they say is like the former Janjaweed, that is the force that the then military ruler Umar al-Bashir created to counter or to create the issues that happened in Darfur. So why are these two people now at each other's throat?
Now, you see, they say in English, or what Chinua Achebe said, when two elephants fight, the grass suffers. But according to what I was told, Nyerere added another dimension.
Right.
He said it is not only when the elephants fight that the grass suffers, even when they make love, the grass suffers. So you find that when leaders are fighting, they are not fighting because of the masses. They are fighting
for themselves,
for their own selfish interest.
Because
when you see them together, it is also because they are enjoying how they are suppressing their own people.
Because earlier, the two men, these two generals that are currently fighting, were together in conspiring and getting rid of Umar al-Bashir.
That's correct. They got rid of al-Bashir. Al-Burhan became the head of the
transitional government, yes.
Dogala became the head of the militia fighting in Darfur.
Which was much earlier. He started that and then he transformed now into the deputy, and they tolerated him continuing in that role.
In 2021, the two of them staged the coup. They removed the civilian part of the military package. I say package because you have military, you have civilians. But when I saw that, essentially it is daiki.
There's a combination of civilians and and military. Yeah.
Now, along the line, they started pulling apart because of their bloated ego. One is head of the military or the armed forces. One is heading the militia group. Now, having been in Sudan, why should that militia group be created in the first place?
And even if it was for a purpose, why continue to exist?
In Darfur.
Yes.
So it was created for a purpose, and that purpose was to subdue the people of Darfur. Why, since 2013, they have not been able to
dismantle it,
solve the problem of Darfur? They have not been able to solve the problem of Darfur simply because there is no honesty in what is happening. I have said it many times that the problem in Darfur is not as intractable as some people think it is. It is not. All that the people of Darfur are asking for is justice and fairness. What is due to the Arabs should also be due to them. But they are not getting a fair deal.
I remember just in the hotel across the road, Chida Hotel,
yes.
That was where Nigeria was hosting the Darfur talks.
Yes.
That is, all the rebel groups and the government were sitting and discussing
yes.
in just this nearby Chida Hotel. And yet what you are saying is that up to now, the problem hasn't been fully solved.
The ruling military stroke Arab clique running the show in Sudan are not ready to have peace in Darfur. It has taken 20 years now. The Darfur crisis is still on. Why? If there is sincerity of purpose, this crisis should have been solved within weeks or months. But to take 20 years and this crisis is still on, to me, it is failure of leadership.
But can we come back to the present? The Darfur problem is still there simmering,
yeah.
But a bigger problem has emerged. This contest for power between the two most powerful people, one heading the full Sudanese military,
yeah.
And then the other heading a militia that is variously described to have a strength of between 40,000 to maybe up to 100,000 armed
yeah.
men.
Now, the first thing one will ask, if you create 100,000 militia to go to Darfur, you must have an agenda, because 100,000 soldiers in Darfur is just too much. It is just aimed at subduing the people of Darfur. It is not to look for peace in Darfur. Now you have a Burhan that is the head of the armed forces. Now the head of the armed forces and the head of the militia have embarked on a needless war. And it is more painful to me that Muslims will be fighting Muslims in the month of Ramadan. It is just terrible. Now they are fighting. Who are bearing the brunt?
Very interesting.
The civilians are the ones that are bearing the brunt.
And I will want us to unpack more of that when we come back from a short break. Welcome back. It is still 30 minutes, the interactive program of Trust Television. Ambassador, you were mentioning that indeed the Sudanese people are all bearing the brunt of this. We've seen and heard of reports that it is not just in Khartoum, there is something going on in Al Fasha, in a number of other cities within the country, and each side is claiming like having the upper hand. What is your assessment of how it will all end?
Now, people are talking of international mediation, which is very good. But Khartoum Airport is closed down. So there will not be international flights. Therefore, until the two combatants come to their senses and say this thing, they are posing, either because of the end of the Ramadan approaching or for one reason or the other, they are going to pause, and then mediators like IGAD from the region to go in. But from the way I look at things, as if it is a war to the finish. Each one is determined to get rid of the other. Just like what we saw in Ethiopia after Haile Selassie was toppled. So, the issue that people have to ask, why in the first place? They are not doing it for the Sudanese people. They are doing it for themselves. They toppled
Umar
Omar
al-Bashir
al-Bashir and formed the Daiki with civilians. And then Al-Burhan and Dogala, the same people, now staged another coup in 2021.
Yes, the Prime Minister Hamdok.
One, Al-Burhan is the head, Dogala is his number two. So you can see that it is question of clash of ego. Just like you have in South Sudan, Salva Kiir and Riek Machar not getting on well, and that is why you have the terrible situation in South Sudan.
So can we still stay in the Sudan, Republic of Sudan? Because the concern is that this thing is already consuming lots of lives. At the last count, about 100 people have died, and more are likely to die with all the artillery shells that each side is lobbing on each other. Does Nigeria have a role in all this? Because just yesterday, there's a report that President Muhammadu Buhari in Makkah met with the Chadian president, where they both agreed on the need for intervention of African elders.
Yes, I saw the video clip where the president of Chad, the interim president of Chad, visited President Buhari. And I read what each one of them said. But I didn't take that of Chad seriously, because he himself is guilty of spanning agreement. He was to rule or to hold power for 2 years and then election, as African leaders normally do. He now wangled his way. No election took place. And then they extended his stay and now said the caveat earlier placed on him that he could not run in the election, he is now free to run. Now, to me, he is not an honest broker.
He wasn't offering to broker, but I mean, Chad has a border with both Nigeria and with Sudan.
Yes,
and they have currently closed their border with Sudan. So which countries can President Muhammadu Buhari, who is just a few weeks still as president, can he do something that maybe in the context of the African Union?
You see, let me say that our foreign policy, I'm sorry to say it, that is my observation. The foreign policy of Nigeria is not what it used to be. So because the foreign policy is not what it used to be, the voice of Nigeria in the international community is muted. I remember very well when I was a young foreign service officer, anything that happened to other African countries to know where Nigeria stood. But that is not the case anymore.
Maybe we are too busy worrying about internal affairs.
We are now looking inward, but there's nothing wrong with looking inward. Every African country should be of concern to Nigeria. We have the most powerful economy. We have the largest population. All the indices are in favor of Nigeria. But we are not taking advantage of the advantages we have over other countries.
But some Nigerians may even say, why bother about Sudan? Because some Nigerians will say, well, it's the Sudanese killing each other, why should Nigeria get involved? What will be your answer to that?
Nigeria should be involved because we have millions of Nigerians, either as Nigerians or as Sudanese Nigerians. Therefore, whatever happens in Sudan should be of concern to Nigeria because our people are living in that country. I give you an example. We have in Sudan, Serkin Sudan of Wurno. I visited his palace.
As a traditional ruler of Nigerian origin, that is.
He came from the royal family, the Sultanate family. When the Sultan wouldn't...
The Sultanate of Sokoto you are talking about.
So when I went to his palace and I saw, in fact, I didn't need anybody to tell me, if you know any member of the Sultanate family, you know that he came from that. Yeah. I spent a night with him. And I'm giving this example so as to show that whatever is happening in Sudan, it should concern Nigeria because we have millions of our people living in that country. The question now that comes, how did the people get there?
Yeah, some people do wonder.
Now, some of these people were on their way to Mecca on pilgrimage.
Okay, when people used to trek to go for the pilgrimage.
Trek or go on camels
right.
or horses. And so they got stranded in Sudan and decided to live there. So, in all honesty, I feel that whatever happens to them should be of concern to us.
So how practically can countries like Nigeria and other African countries, members of the African Union, intervene to see that these people do not fight to finish, because each one is thinking he has some advantage and he can subdue the other, and that is how civil wars usually start?
You see, the thing is that it will be something very good if others will come in. Just we talked about Nigeria, we talked about Chad, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and the rest should come in. At least talk to them. I believe the Arab League, if they talk to them, they will listen. Because I can tell you, without fear or contradiction, the Sudanese rate their relationship with the Arab League more than their relationship with African Union. They see themselves as Arabs, not Africans. So, the Arab countries, especially the Arab League, should get involved. Fortunately, it's Arabs fighting Arabs. So, there should be an effort to get them to sit down and discuss what the problems are.
Do you see the possibility of them who are like fighting each other now going back to continue as president and deputy president in the same
if
country?
they are forced, if you use carrot and stick, it will work. Sudan is a very poor country right now. If it is a poor country, a country like Saudi Arabia, okay, we know part of your problem is finance. We are ready to give finance, but you have to stop this senseless war. They will listen. And if you look at it critically, all that Dogala is saying is that Al-Burhan is not serious about transition to civilian rule.
But is he himself any serious about it?
You see, he wants to the civilians on his side. But from what I have read, the civilians are not with him because he maltreated the civilians when he is still there as head of the militia. The militia never treated the civilian population well. So whatever he is saying it because he wants undeserved sympathy.
I recall that even the suppression of the protests that were on against the ruling junta, it was the militia that cracked on them and killed over 100 people.
And killed them.
Yes.
So civilians will not take side with Jogala because his militia severely dealt with civilians during their demonstration for civilian rule.
And where does that leave civilian rule, the prospect of civilian rule in Sudan?
With the war going on now, it will take years. If Al-Burhan gets the upper hand, he will have to reorganize the armed forces, including the militia, and that will take some time. The civilians will continue to look at what is happening. And if he decides that there will be civilian rule, there will be a transition period. And apart from a transition period, there must be a new constitution. Sudan needs complete constitution, not any cosmetic changes.
In 30 seconds, what if it is the head of this militia, the rapid support force, that gets the upper hand?
Okay.
What is the likely scenario? 30 seconds.
Yes, if he gets the upper hand, he is saying, oh, Al-Burhan is not keen on civilian rule. But the thing is that all the atrocities were committed together with him. So what he is doing now is to get undeserved support from the civilians. But if he gets the upper hand, then people will ask him to keep to his promise of civilian rule. How long he will take, nobody knows.
That's a very good point to end our discussion today. Thank you very much, Ambassador Sulaiman Dahiru, for helping to unpack this complicated Sudanese situation.
Thank you so much.
Viewers, that's the end of this edition of 30 Minutes. Keep at it with us.